The following information is from the organization known as the Sitcom Arbitration Association, a sole proprietorship private foundational trust organization. And they'd like to discuss with you, arbitration contracts. They feel that it is important that you understand the fundamentals so as to obtain the full benefit and are associated with arbitration contracts. So without further ado, most people are unfamiliar with arbitration. They really do not realize how it impacts many of their purchase decisions and our internet activities. Arbitration, otherwise known as a form of alternative dispute resolution, is utilized by most courts. Most courts will require the parties to submit to an alternative dispute resolution as a means for resolving problems without going to court. Arbitration is a provision in a contract which says that a party will elect to go to a hearing before an arbitrator to avoid going to court. The only provisions in arbitration is that, in most cases, the parties have to agree that the arbitrator's decision is binding upon the parties. The law permits parties to do what's known as a notice and change of terms of conditions as a way of amending an arbitration agreement. The notice and change of terms and conditions is provided for under the Basic Principles of Contract Law Restatement, 2nd, of Contracts. A person doesn't need to have a full understanding of contract law in order to add an arbitration clause to their contract. Nor does a person need a full understanding of contract law to know how to do a notice of change in terms of conditions. We must emphasize that every person must do some research in order to better understand the avenue for which they propose to travel. We are providing this information to you so that you will have an opportunity to be better informed. Let us begin with arbitration contracts and arbitration clauses. An arbitration contract is a legally binding agreement between two or more parties to resolve their disputes through arbitration rather than through the court system. Arbitration is a private process that is typically faster, less expensive, and more confidential than litigation. Arbitration clause. An arbitration clause is a provision in a contract that requires the parties to resolve any disputes that arise out of the contract through arbitration. The arbitration clause must be in writing and must be signed by at least one of the parties to the contract. Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause is a provision in the United States Constitution that gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce. The Commerce Clause has been interpreted by the courts to mean that arbitration agreements are enforceable under federal law, even if the parties to the agreement are located in different states. Opt-out clause. An opt-out clause is a provision in an arbitration agreement that allows one or more parties to the agreement to opt out of the arbitration process. The opt-out clause must be in writing and must be signed by at least one of the parties to the contract. Expiration date. An expiration date is a date after which an arbitration agreement is no longer valid. The expiration date must be in writing and must be signed by at least one of the parties to the contract. Notification to all parties. The parties to an arbitration agreement must be notified of any changes to the agreement. The notification must be in writing and must be sent to all parties to the agreement. Doable and workable provisions. The provisions of an arbitration agreement must be doable and workable. This means that the provisions must be clear, concise, and easy to understand. The provisions must also be practical and enforceable. Acquiescence. Acquiescence is a legal term that means to consent or agree to something without saying anything. If one party to an arbitration agreement acquiesces to the other party's request to arbitrate a dispute, the first party may be barred from later challenging the validity of the arbitration agreement. Confession of Judgment Clause. A confession of judgment clause is a provision in a contract that allows one party to the contract to obtain a judgment against the other party without having to go through a trial. The confession of judgment clause must be in writing and must be signed by at least one of the parties to the contract. Conclusion: arbitration contracts can be a valuable tool for businesses and individuals who want to resolve their disputes quickly, efficiently, and confidentially. However, it is important to make sure that the arbitration agreement is clearly visible in the agreement, or it will be construed as invalid, ambiguous, and/or obscured. By following the tips in this presentation, you can help to ensure that your arbitration agreement is legally sound. At SAAAlimited.com, you will find several sample templates of contracts with arbitration clauses. However, please note that only the incarceration contract and the child support contract include confession of judgment clauses. You will have to add the confession of judgment clause to the other contracts in order to utilize this as a means of obtaining a confirmation of the arbitration award should you seek such. Please further note that SAAAlimited.com is a full-fledged arbitration association that has reduced its prices that it charges its clients who seek arbitration. In order to help facilitate providing an affordable avenue for the disenfranchised segment of society, i.e. individuals with low incomes, SAAAlimited.com, otherwise known as the SAAAArbitratrion Arbitration Association, now operating solely as a private foundational trust organization, has been in existence for greater than 6 years, has withstood every legal challenge, and remains here to help. Our clients come to peaceful resolution respecting the agreements that they verify notification upon all parties and proof of default. At the SAAAArbitratrion Arbitration Association, we do not take sides, we do not favor one party over another. We look to the agreement to see that the agreement is in compliance with the basics of contract law and the principles associated therewith. We owe no allegiance to any party in our government with respects to rendering an award. We adhere to the principles of the United States Arbitration Act of 1925. Prior to the assignment to the United States Congress our IN number, and the reason for this is that it is believed, based upon presumed understanding, that in the IN number is provided to corporation for tax accounting purposes, for withholdings and other tax collecting obligations. Congress has no authority to enact a law under its business engaging commercial activities capacity, as was the case perceived in the 1940s. As the Constitution delegates no such authority to any private corporation, not even one claiming to rep our government and resident. When there was an attempt to amend the United States Arbitration Act and rephrasing it as the Federal Arbitration Act, either way, according to the parties in their agreement with our organization, we control the law for which we will rely upon. Here, at SAA, it is our policy that we will rely on the United States Arbitration Act of 1925 and the contract as being the sole law governing the dispute between the parties for which they have granted us the authority to mandate such a provision. Arbitration associations operating under federal statute are authorized by the United States Congress, and so they are federal arbitration associations. And to date there are no federal regulations other than the United States Arbitration Act governing the authority of an arbitration association operating under the aforementioned parameters. It is our hope that this provides basic information to assist our clients in accessing an alternative to going to court.